The Runaway Wife. This is a story of a fallen Muslim girl. This is also a love story of an Egyptian prostitute who fell in love with one of her clients, who changed her life for the better. It was written in English and translated into Arabic by Dr. A. Ahmed. Copyright. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author except by the reviewer, who may cite brief passages from the review for printing in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. All characters in this book are fictitious, and any resemblance to actual people, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Chapter 7. That night, the former Egyptian prostitute Ikram couldn't sleep. She stayed awake for a long time thinking about her two sons, Adil and Imad. She tried to convince herself that her children were not killed because of the sins of their adulterous mother. Memories of those painful days appeared before her eyes as if she were watching a horror movie. She remembered the tragic events of her life minute by minute. With warm tears, she recalled her struggle to live a good life after she fled her hometown. She did everything in her power to protect herself from being disgraced, but she couldn't. She began her honorable work as a maid in the homes of wealthy people. The male members of those families, with whom she resided and had treated her like a slave, sexually harassed her at night and attempted to rape her several times. The stray girl escaped from those homes and wandered the streets day and night like an outcast person. Even on the streets, she had to hide, sometimes running from bad men and male police officers. The men sexually harassed her and tried to rape her several times during the night, and sometimes they tried to have sex with her in broad daylight like a bitch with dogs in the streets. Her struggle did not last long until she eventually turned into a prostitute. Even the fact that she became a prostitute was not sufficient punishment for her Muslim society, which turned her into a drunkard and a seller of alcohol and drugs. She had become stinking of many vices and reeked of scandal and shame. From a runaway and wayward wife, she became a fallen girl. In those terrible days and dark nights, men devoured her body like wild beasts. They sucked her blood, ate her flesh, and turned her into bones. She lived in those brothels and bars until Hafez came to her and saved her like an angel of hope from that miserable and shameful life. Within 12 months, Ikram blossomed again like a beautiful lotus flower plucked from the mud and dirt and kept in a healthy place. Her boyfriend brought hope back to her broken heart and wounded spirit. Once again, the Egyptian girl Ikram began to think and act like a person with good morals. She missed her two innocent children and came to rescue them from the jaws of her cruel Islamic society. She is willing to put her life in danger to remove her two sons, Adil and Imad, from the hands of the people who abused them and held them responsible for a crime they did not commit. They put them in a worse situation than their fallen, runaway mother. It is the greatest insult in the Islamic community to call someone Wald Haram, or Bint Haram, which means an illegitimate child. A sodomite man may tolerate being described as a homosexual or gay man and a promiscuous girl as a prostitute woman or a lesbian, but neither of them can accept being described as an illegitimate boy or an illegitimate girl. They may kill you on the spot if you describe either of them with that disgraceful and socially unacceptable name. Thus, people began to call Ikram's two sons children of adultery or Aulad Haram, and treated them like illegitimate sons or outcast beggars. The next morning, the sad mother got up earlier than the day before. This time she remained lying on the bed like a dead body. Her lover treated her as if she was an injured or sick girl suffering from an incurable disease. He kept supporting her back with some pillows and sitting next to her the whole time. After he felt that she was able to speak, he then asked her to continue telling her sad story. Ikram did not remove the Ethiopian Anisha bottle from her hand and did not stop smoking. She was coughing every now and then. When it was time for her to have breakfast, her boyfriend fed her into her mouth again. She objected to that pampering with her words while she was still crying and coughing. Hafez wiped away her tears and covered her lips with kisses when her mouth stopped speaking and her voice exploded with screams and sobs. Then she said, crying, Yes, I hate to tell you what happened to me after that. I desperately wanted to return to my husband's home due to the scandal of having given birth to an illegitimate child by my Coptic lover, Gabriel, whom everyone described as an infidel, uncircumcised, impure Christian. I and my family members were suffering from disgrace, and the neighbors' gossip was eating away at my chest like cancer, tormenting my conscience, and making me act like a madwoman possessed by demons. I wanted to return to my husband because he began to believe that the illegitimate child was his legitimate, permissible son that he fathered from his own body. I knew that no one could get me out of that hellish life except him. I hated his second wife, Nabila, and his third wife, Fatima. They live now with my husband in his family home. Before I ran away from him, they lived in their parents' homes, and my husband would visit every woman there and have sex with her within the earshot of her family members. Now I know that I will live in the same house with two rival wives who hate me more than they hate the smell of their own poop. So, I knew that my life with them and my male child would be hellish because none of them had given birth to a child. Specifically, I held his wife, Nabila, responsible for what happened to me and the problem of my inability to return to my husband because he divorced me 3 times. She was the one who objected and spread the news until it reached the ears of the imam of the mosque, who confirmed the legitimacy of the objection to my returning to my husband until I married another Muslim man, and that husband divorced me. My husband's love for me returned again after he began to believe that my ill-gotten child was his son. He often came to my parents' house to meet me. He spent more time with me than he spent with his second wife, Nabila, and his third wife, Fatima. Nabila objected to this and accused me of committing adultery, having sex with, or cohabiting with my ex-husband, which is a sexual act forbidden by Islam. She told my husband to his face that he was committing adultery with his divorced wife, Ikram, who divorced her permanently, and therefore she was forbidden to him forever unless another husband fucked her with his penis in her pussy and then divorced her. My husband loved his son Adel Al-Taib Salih and brought beautiful dresses for me and clothes for the baby. I tried to love my husband as before, but I couldn't. However, I could see that my husband loved his child more than he loved me. The love of my beloved Christian Gabriel remained in my heart. At his house, I continued to meet him secretly, but I avoided physical relations with him for fear that my husband and his 2 wives would find out. It has been 1 year, and we have not been able to reunite as husband and wife. My parents did not object to my husband's visits to me. They even let us spend some time alone. But we had never had sex together during that long separation time. The women are gossiping again. The neighbors are starting to talk. Most of them believed Nabila's rumors that my husband and I were cohabiting and living an adulterous life. One day, my ex-husband proposed an idea that he thought might solve our intractable problem. He told me that it was possible for us to get remarried again if I married another man, and that man divorced me one day after our Islamic marriage contract was concluded according to the Book of God, the Quran, and the Sunnah of his Prophet Muhammad. At first, I was against the idea. At that time, I could not imagine myself having sex with another man whom I did not love even once in order to return to my ex-husband, who had divorced me 3 times. And I'd heard stories of thrice divorced Muslim wives who tried to do this and got into more trouble. What is the guarantee that the second Muslim husband, the so-called muhalil, will divorce me after having sex with me once in my parents' house? Many of these fake husbands broke their vows after marrying those thrice divorced women. My husband said it would be arranged secretly between him and the other man. He also told me that there are men who can be bribed into such fake marriages. When I refused to submit to that sham marriage, my husband told me that the muhalil would only marry me on paper, but that there would not be any sexual contact between me and him even if it was just once. In other words, the fake husband won't have sex with me. I believed my husband's promise and agreed to a second Islamic marriage with another man. Then my husband brought in a man who agreed to be the muhalil for my final divorce from my ex-husband. According to Islamic law, the muhalil is the second husband who is supposed to legalize the private parts of a Muslim wife whose husband has divorced her 3 times and who has forbidden him to take her back as a wife. When the neighbors saw the muhalil man, they knew that he was just a fake husband. I have never seen a man as ugly as that man in my life. He was short in stature, and his head was as large and square as the rest of his body. His little eyes could barely be seen. He was bald and most likely in his late 50s. My ex-husband made the deal with him. I did not know how much money was paid to him to conclude this legitimate deal. I got married to him on the same day he came to my family house. My former husband brought with him a Mazoon who is a graduate of Al-Azhar Al-Sharif University wearing a hat or a red turban, and he has a license from the Ministry of Religious Affairs to conclude marriage contracts between brides and grooms. That sheikh brought with him 2 Muslim men to witness my marriage contract with the muhalil. After the marriage contract was concluded and the Al-Azhari official received the price for his fees, he issued 2 marriage certificates, one for the husband and one for the wife. He blessed our marital union and wished us a happy married life and the birth of a good Muslim posterity. He then left with the 2 witnesses. We agreed that the muhalil husband would sleep one day at my family's house and the next morning he would divorce me and leave. He slept all night alone in a separate room. My mother spoke to him kindly, served him dinner, and gave him my father's prayer mat on which to perform his night and morning prayers. Chapter 8. Unfortunately, the so-called thrice-divorced wife's pussy legislator, or muhalil, broke his promise and refused to divorce me the next morning. My ex-Muslim husband threatened to kill him if he did not announce my divorce and leave immediately. Fearing that he would be killed in an honor killing at the hands of my ex-husband, the pussy's legalizer fled in terror. After that, the muhalil husband filed an official complaint with the Sharia court against me as his disobedient Muslim wife, who refused to allow him to have sexual intercourse with her and asked for a divorce from him without a lawful Islamic reason. He also filed a complaint at the police station against my ex-husband, who threatened to kill him if he dared to come near the residence of his ex-wife, whom he divorced 3 times and who became legally forbidden to him. The matter reached His Eminence Imam Sheikh Atayatullah, who is the Imam of the mosque near us. The Imam said that even if the muhalil husband agrees to divorce me, I will not be able to return to my ex-husband. He cited the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, in which he said that the second muhalil husband must taste my honey and I must taste his honey, which means that we must have sex. When pressure was put on muhalil by my family members and my ex-husband, he agreed to divorce me on one condition, which was that I have sexual intercourse with him in bed, even if only once. My husband and family agreed to his condition. But I vehemently refused to allow such an ugly black man, whom I neither love nor recognize as my husband, to have sex with me. My ex-husband begged me to compromise my moral integrity by allowing him to sleep with me once so that he could fulfill the condition of the Prophet Muhammad, may God bless him and grant him peace. After a lot of begging and pressure from family members and my ex-husband, I agreed to fulfill the condition of our Prophet, the infallible chosen one, may the best prayers and peace be upon him. I have never felt more humiliated and abused in my entire life than I did when that ugly man had sex with me in my house, in front of my ex-husband and my family. His dirty body smelled like the decomposing carcass of a dead animal. While he was fucking me with his thick cock in my pussy, his mouth produced a foul odor. He fell on my naked body just as a male animal fell on the body of its resisting female. Once he attacked my body, I started to fight him and push him away. He was such a powerful monster that I couldn't push him away from my body. I regretted having agreed to be locked in a room with such a brutal man. I did everything to prevent him from raping me and emptying his load of semen into my womb and impregnating me. I scratched his face with my fingernails. I hit his body with my fists. I bit his cheeks and shoulders with my sharp teeth until my mouth was filled with his blood. I screamed at the top of my lungs, but no one came to save me. Before his cock ejaculated into my pussy and emptied his dirty semen into my womb and made me pregnant with his child, I passed out. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself in the hospital. I saw my mother sitting next to me on the bed with a sad face as if she was expecting me to die. My ex-husband was standing near me and looking at me anxiously as if he was also anticipating the loss of my life. When I looked into his eyes, he turned his face away in shame, as if he felt that he was a pimp who had hired another man to fuck his wife and legalize her pussy for him so that he could remarry her again. With bitterness and heartbreak, The sad Egyptian girl, Ikram, stopped speaking and began to cry. Her crying turned into a violent reaction, and she went into hysterics with bouts of insane anger. She hit her cheeks, pulled her hair, and cried like a wounded woman who wanted to scream all the pain from her chest. Her friend Hafez held her hands and prevented her from hurting herself. Then he took her in his arms, and he also cried with her, with deep sadness and righteous anger that filled his heart. After drinking some glasses of liquor, she finally calmed down and the two lovers became a little relaxed. On that day, the pain-stricken daughter, Ikram, decided to go to her mother, Khadija, and talk to her, regardless of the consequences. Her lover Hafez reluctantly accepted her risky plan. He was afraid that his girlfriend might be arrested by the police and go to prison. It is not yet known why she fled her home in town and hid from the law. He asked her whether she had killed the Muhalil husband who had legalized her pussy for her ex-husband in order for him to remarry her. Ikram told him that she did never see again that ugly man who raped her in her backyard. He got the rest of his money and divorced her the next day after he fucked her and legalized her pussy with his penis for her ex-husband, who divorced her 3 times so that he could marry her again and disappear from their lives forever. Then the lawful wife remarried her ex-husband as soon as she left the hospital. The 2 rival wives, Nabila and Fatima, moved to their old home and lived with their husband and their son. However, on that day, the estranged girl, a fugitive from justice, stray, and former prostitute, Ikram, and her boyfriend, Hafez, left the hotel an hour before the previous day. They were carefully disguising themselves the way they had before. Ikram was very drunk that day because she drank a lot of alcohol. Because he saw her staggering, Hafez suggested that they not walk but rather hire a taxi. He was afraid that she would fall on the side of the road, hit her head, and lose consciousness. If something like this happened to her, she might be taken to the hospital in an ambulance, and her true identity would be revealed. After her treatment, she would be put behind bars and tried for her crime, which forced her to flee from her family, husband, and sons, town, and fall prey to prostitution and addiction. It was a 20-minute taxi ride from the hotel to her parents' house. When the taxi arrived at her family's home, Ikram asked the cab driver to allow them to stay inside his car. They agreed with him to pay additional money for delaying and waiting until they completed their mission. After waiting for an hour, Ikram saw her mother, Haja Khadija, leaving their house. She quickly got out of the taxi and asked Hafez to follow her closely. Her mother was going in the opposite direction. They quickened their steps until they reached her. When the mother felt that some people were following her, she stopped, turned around, and faced them. She looked at them with fear and thought they were thugs who wanted to attack her and steal her purse. Ikram whispered quietly, "Do not be afraid, my beloved mother. I am your runaway daughter, Ikram." The mother couldn't believe her ears when she heard a strange girl talking to her. She recognized her daughter's voice, but not the stuttering girl in the black niqab, as if she were a Muslim terrorist wearing an explosive vest and coming to blow herself along with her body into bits and pieces. Those years of abuse and suffering have changed Ikram so much that even her first Muslim husband, Al-Taib Salih, may not recognize her. "Mom, come to the taxi. I have some questions to ask you." "Are you really my missing daughter, Ikram?" The mother asked a little loudly. "Yes, I am your estranged daughter, Ikram, and this is my 3rd Muslim husband, Hafez." The mother looked at her prodigal daughter's new husband for a while and then turned her gaze to Akram. She was still in shock. The daughter took her mother by the hand and led her to the taxi. The taxi approached them in his car, and Hafez waved his hand to the driver. The runaway wife opened the back door and asked her mother to enter first. Then she pushed herself behind her mother and sat remarkably close to her. When Ikram revealed her face, her mother recognized her. She embraced her lost daughter and began to cry bitterly. Ikram responded to her mother's feelings, hugged her, and cried with her. The taxi driver then moved his car towards the direction Hafez had asked him to go. "Where are my sons Adel and Imad?" the runaway daughter asked her crying mother. "Where have you been, my daughter Ikram, all this time?" The mother asked while still crying. I can't tell you anything now. I want to know what happened to my 2 sons after I escaped. The police took them away. They did not allow us to keep them. What did the police do to them? They put them in an orphanage. What happened to my husband, Al-Taib Salih? Nothing happened to him. Where is he now? He lives with his second wife, Nabila, and his 2 other Muslim wives. Did he marry a 4th Muslim wife after I ran away? Yes, he married a woman named Sakina. But I don't know much about them. Did any one of his 3 Muslim wives give birth to a child? God did not bless him with a child with any one of his 3 wives, Nabila, Fatima, and Sakina. He was unable to produce a successor. They are barren women. Why can't he be the one who is barren and unable to have children? But he is a man, and the Imam of the mosque, Sheikh Atayatullah, said that a man cannot be barren. Ikram wanted to tell her mother that may God's curse be upon the Imam and his false teachings, but she restrained her righteous anger. Instead, she asked her, "Where's the orphanage where my sons Adel and Imad are kept?" "It's located near the main prison." "Have you visited my children since the police took them to the orphanage?" Imam Atayatullah advised us to disown them because they are illegitimate children. "So, you, their grandmother, haven't seen them since I left them and ran away?" "I never saw them again because they were the children of adultery and indecency." Ikram said to her mother while she was about to clog her throat with intense righteous wrath and strangle her to death. "Will you get out of the taxi now? I do not want to see your face again, and from today onwards I disown you, because you are a hard-hearted grandmother and God has removed mercy from your accursed heart. I even disown my father Sulla, my brother Samir, and all my other relatives, and may God's curse be upon them, both the living and the dead. Consider me dead in your life and never ask about me again." Ikram felt like pushing her hard-hearted mother out of the taxi until she fell upside down on the ground, but somehow she managed to control her righteous anger. That night, the sad Egyptian girl filled her stomach with a large amount of alcohol. She had never drunk as much as she did that day. She couldn't believe that people could be so merciless and heartless as her family. During her drunkenness, she was constantly crying for her 2 innocent children. She despised herself even more when she realized that she was the cause of their misery. Her heartbroken boyfriend Hafez tried to learn more about the rest of his heartbroken girlfriend's tragic story, but he couldn't. Ikram was very dead drunk and had become so intoxicated that she did not know what to say or do. She mentioned the names of some people whom she had not mentioned before and said confused sentences from which Hafez could not understand any meaning. When she was no longer able to move one of her limbs, she asked her friend to pour alcohol into her mouth. But Hafez refused to do so at first. When he refused to pour alcohol into her mouth like medicine, she began quarreling with him and accusing him of conspiring against her with her family. She said to him, "You're like them, a traitorous friend, and all of you are slutty and obscene, and all of her family members are prostitutes and sodomites." To please her, Hafez filled the rest of the bottle with water and began pouring it into her mouth until she fell asleep. Chapter 9. When the Egyptian girl Ikram, who fell from her bed on the hard marble floor while sleeping, overcame her stupor caused by drinking a large amount of alcohol and woke up from her sleep, it was already the next day. It was already evening. Hafez was concerned about her health. He stayed by her side most of the time. He hesitated to take her to the hospital for her safety. He became more afraid that the police would arrest her after he heard her talking and quarreling with her mother yesterday. He is now afraid that the hospital administration will recognize her and inform the police. He did everything to help her get back to normal. He picked her up from the hardwood floor and placed her on the bed. He poured cold water on her head. He helped her vomit up the large amount of alcohol she had consumed the night before. When Ikram woke up from the alcoholic stupor, she felt a severe headache and felt as if she had been hit by a sledgehammer on her head. Her eyes could barely open. Hafez gave her some over-the-counter medication, which eased her headache. Then he ordered for her from the hotel restaurant black coffee without milk. After another hour, his girlfriend Ikram began to feel better. She wanted to drink again, but Hafez stopped her. She was only allowed to smoke. After some time, Ikram was able to eat some food. Then she took a shower with cold water. After eating and showering, she was completely sober. She sat by the window and continued smoking. After a long silence and smoking, the prodigal girl, Ikram, looked at her friend Hafez and said, "Do you want to hear the rest of the story?" "Yes, my dear. Tell me what prompted you to flee your home, your city, and the police." "After the Muhalal man raped me and legalized my pussy, my ex-husband took me back to his house after marrying me again. We lived in peace for a few months. In order to please me, my husband officially divorced his second wife, Navila, and closed her chapter forever. At least that's what I thought until I met my mother yesterday and learned that he had brought her home. What a foolish and naive girl I was at that time. I wasted the best years of my life competing with my nemesis, Navila. In the end, I lost everything and she gained everything. I lost my 2 children, my husband, my honor, and myself. I became homeless and helpless on the streets until I ended up in brothels and bars, selling alcohol and drugs, and my body was like a degenerate, worthless prostitute. I sold alcohol, drugs, and my body, something no free and honorable Arab girl would ever do. I became addicted to drinking alcohol and smoking cigarettes and shisha. One mistake I made in haste ruined everything. I wish I could change the history of my life and go back to the time before I met my husband. I feel ashamed of my past. I hate my husband bitterly and I hate my ex-girlfriend Navila so much. My husband is supposed to be called the bad ghost, not Al-Taib Salih. The stray girl and runaway wife, Ikram, uttered the last sentence while crying bitterly. Hafez turned her face to him and allowed her to bury her head in his chest. "Please, Hafez, let me drink some alcohol. I need to drink now more than ever in my fucking useless life," the fallen girl said, still crying. Hafez looked at her face and saw tears covering her eyes, which were still red with alcohol. He looked at her with pity. He knows that she has become an alcoholic. Or lose her mind. He felt that if he didn't let her drink, she might die of sadness. He brought the bottle and filled her cup. With trembling hands, Ikram emptied 3 cups of strong Abyssinian Aisha into her stomach before beginning to speak again. My problem suddenly started again. One day I was alone in my room at my husband's house. My husband was at work. By the way, after the death of his mother and father, my husband had to go to work. His father died while I was at my parents' house after my 3rd divorce. The Sharia court distributed his parents' property and wealth between him and his 9 siblings. Even the house we were living in was sold at auction, and the money was divided among the 10 siblings according to the Sharia law based on the teachings of the Holy Quran and the blessed Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. My husband got very little money from his deceased parents. After that we lived in a rented house and my husband had to work to support us. After he brought me back, he divorced his wife, Navila, and sent his wife, Fatima, to her family's house without divorcing her. The 2 of us now live with our son Adele in a small, rented house. At any rate, one day I was lying in bed reading a book. It is a sad novel written in French and translated into Arabic. It is entitled Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. I was very immersed in the tragic events of that book story. It was the afternoon of a very hot summer day. I opened the window and pulled the curtain to let fresh air into the room. Our window opened onto the street. My young son Adele was sleeping in another small room near our bedroom. While I was reading the long story of the novel, I suddenly felt something hit my face, so I screamed in terror and jumped out of bed. I hesitated to look out the window. I looked at the bed to see what was wrong with me. I saw a big white envelope lying near the pillow on which my head was lying. I knew someone had thrown that envelope into my room through the window. At first, I was afraid to approach it. I thought about calling our neighbor Hamid. I dropped the idea because he was the only male neighbor next door to us. He was a bachelor and a handsome single young man. My husband won't like it if he finds out that I brought a man home in his absence. I remembered what happened between us when the neighbors saw my Christian lover Gabriel and told my husband about him. So, I gathered my courage and went to bed. I looked out the window, but I didn't see anyone standing outside. I looked at the envelope. Then I lifted it. It was very heavy. I quickly jumped on the bed and closed the window. For a while, I hesitated to open that envelope and see what was in it. I thought I should keep it until my husband came home from work and opened it himself. But something inside me made me open it. Slowly, fearfully, and cautiously, I opened it as if I expected there to be a bomb or a snake inside. I found some pictures and a small piece of white paper inserted inside. When I saw the first picture, I saw what I never expected to see in my entire life. I saw my own photo. I was photographed completely naked without even my underwear and bra. I was lying on a big bed. The second photo showed that I was having sex with someone. I couldn't see his face, but I saw his butt. The next picture showed my pussy and my black pubic hair covering it as a dead rat over it. Many dirty pictures of me completely naked and fornicating with that man. I was amazed when I saw all these pictures as if they were pornographic clips taken from the internet. Then I opened the note on the white paper and read it. The memo stated that if I did not appear on a specific date and address, copies of those obscene pornographic images would be mailed to my Muslim husband, Al-Taib Salih, and my family. I saw my shameful pictures again. These pictures were worse than clips from pornographic films on the internet. They showed all my private parts. Even my large buttocks, my black pubic hair, and my red pussy hole were exposed and visible. If I had to willingly participate in taking some pornographic photos for money, I would not consent to being shamefully photographed as those photos revealed me to be. At first, I decided to wait until my husband came and showed him the photos and the blackmail letter that demanded that I come to a specific place to meet whoever took those photos without my knowledge. I knew that I had not had sexual intercourse with any man except my husband, Al-Taib Salih, my Coptic Christian friend Gabriel, and the Muhalal husband who is called the lawgiver of the triple divorced wife's pussy. None of these three men would do anything like that without my knowledge. The man having sex with me in the pictures was dark in color and had black hair. He does not resemble in any way the three men who slept with me willingly, unwillingly, and knowingly. So, I concluded that the pictures were some kind of scam that was made using Photoshop or artificial intelligence by someone so that he could blackmail me. I was determined to convince my husband and even my family, if necessary, that I had never had sex with someone like the black man who appeared with me in the scandalous photos. Moreover, I have convinced myself that this is a conspiracy hatched by my sworn enemy Nabila to destroy my marriage because she thought it was because of me she had been divorced from her handsome cousin whom she loves to the point of worship. Therefore, I fooled myself into this naive belief for a while. As I overcame the horror of the shock, the wall upon which I had built my belief began to crumble. I recognized the clothes next to me in the photos as my own dresses. Then I began to recognize the furniture and other things in the room, which was like an operating room for my slaughter and skinning of my body while I was alive and burying me in a cemetery while I was alive. The truth attacked my heart like a major heart attack and hit my mind like a bullet fired at point-blank range. I have identified the culprit. He was Faki Mahmood, the witch doctor who was supposed to treat me from barrenness.